And welcome to another edition of the College Pride Press Sunday podcast. As always, I am your host, Brett Kruppel, and I am joined by my co-host, Brett Siegel, and we have a special guest here today, Connor Lagore from University of Missouri. So he has been on the Thursday podcast before, but we wanted to get him doing the College Pride Press car wash of a way and do the Sunday podcast as well. So welcome, Connor, and we'll hop right in as we got a lot to talk about with conference tournaments and bracketology and all that stuff. So I just want to throw it to Brad and Connor and kind of get your opening statements and kind of recaps on what's been going on with some of the smaller tournaments that have concluded and are currently in progress. So we'll go to Brett first.
What's going on, College Pride Press listeners? It's been another crazy week with Champ Week starting up and conference tournaments already off to a bang. Today we saw Florida Gulf Coast punch their ticket into March as the Atlantic Sun champions. In the Big South, we also saw, who was it? Was it Winthrop? Yeah, Winthrop advance. And it's just been a crazy week so far. We got the American East continuing. Ohio Valley wrapped up with a surprising victor in Jacksonville State. So it's just been an absolutely crazy week and start to Champ Week, and cannot wait to see how things are going to finish out down the stretch.
All right, I love it. Connor, what's been your reactions from these conference tournaments so far?
Well, I was really ready for the Campbell Fighting Camels and Chris Clemens to make it to the Final Four this year, but obviously their dreams ended today. But yeah, it's been pretty wild. The Horizon League especially, there's like the 9, the 6, and the 10, I think, all in the semifinals. One of which, the 10 seed, my hometown UW Milwaukee Panthers. I didn't even know they had a basketball team this year. So, but hopefully they can pull off the upset and get back to the big dance. But I'm excited.
You know, those are always the teams you have to look out for. The ones that you forget they have a basketball team, they seem to be the toughest outs. FGCU was that way just a few years ago, and they made it to the Sweet 16. So another team that punched their ticket, FGCU, is going back, Dunk City. So we don't really have an outline this week, as it's kind of been a crazy week with conference tournaments and some regular seasons wrapping up for the bigger conferences. So I just want to kind of jump right in and talk a little bit about some of the major conference tournaments that are going to start. And so we got the ACC and Big Ten are about to kick off. And the ACC, with Brett's favorite, we got to talk about them first, the Duke Blue Devils, the undefeated team that is the 5 seed in their own ACC tournament. So looking at this bracket right now, Brett, what are your thoughts? And what are your thoughts on the Blue Devils as the 5 seed?
Well, as a 5 seed for Duke, I think it's good for them, only because they get more playing time. That's really what this team needs to come together down the stretch. They haven't been healthy all year, like we've mentioned throughout the whole season. And now with all of them finally on the floor and starting to click, they looked good in the game against UNC. It's just at UNC, it's very tough to go to Chapel Hill and pull off a victory. Duke almost did it. UNC was able to pull away because of Justin Jackson and Joel Berry down the stretch. But this Duke team just needs games, and they're most likely going to get a few games in the ACC tournament. They're going to get the winner of Clemson, North Carolina State, and then they should be able to handle that game and move on to play my Louisville Cardinals, which makes me very mad that Louisville's a 4 seed, but we'll talk about that later. But, Duke, they have that tough game against Louisville that I mentioned coming up, and that's pretty much what they're going to be preparing for in practice, and then the game against who should be Clemson, unless North Carolina State's able to pull off the upset. So for Duke in this case, they're going to have a tough ACC tournament, but it's what they need to get ready for March, because they're probably looking at a 3 or 4 seed for the NCAA tournament. I don't see them going lower than a 4, and the peak being probably a 2 if they were to win the whole thing. But yeah, I think Duke, as I've said this whole season, it's just about getting reps with them, and I think they are in a good position right now.
Wow, so you want them to play an additional game. That's very interesting, because you're either running into a Jerron Blossom game or you're running into Dennis Smith and Omar Yurtseven. So, those two teams are not going to be, walkover type of team. So that's very interesting. Connor, what are your thoughts on the ACC tournament and the bracket that's kind of been set up?
A team I had my eye on recently is Wake Forest. I'm not saying they're gonna run the table, but I think they could probably win a couple games. I mean, they probably have the easiest first round matchup with Boston College, and they go to Virginia Tech, who I thought was gonna probably finish in like the top 5 of the ACC. I thought they were that strong. I thought they were that athletic. I love Buzz Williams as a coach. But I kind of like that matchup for Wake Forest. They get pretty good guard play. John Collins is, I think he was first team all ACC this morning. Virginia Tech's not that strong inside, so I kind of like him to have a big game there. I kind of like that matchup for them. And then they go to Florida State, who I feel like they kind of peaked around like late January, early February. They've been kind of coasting a little bit. I feel like they've lost the games that you expect them to, and they won the games that they should have, which is fine. But I'm not sure how much they're going to be able to ride Dwayne Bacon's shoulders for the rest of the month. So we'll see. But I kind of like Wake Forest. I think they get some good matchups. But then the rest of the league, I don't know how much I believe in Notre Dame. Assuming Virginia gets past whoever wins the Georgia Tech pit, assuming they match up with Virginia, I kind of like Virginia win that game. Their defense has looked a lot better recently after kind of being a little inconsistent towards late January. But yeah, I think it's gonna be a good tournament. I think it's probably gonna be the best. I think we're not gonna see as many surprises as maybe we think. For as competitive as the conference was, I think it's gonna kind of play out as we expect it to. I would think we're gonna see something like North Carolina or Virginia, Florida State, Notre Dame, something like that in the final.
Yeah, I'm completely in agree with Connor there. The top half of that bracket it's really top heavy. Interestingly enough, Syracuse, Miami are the 8-9 seed. Duke's in the 5 and Louisville's at the 4. Those are all very strong teams, most likely all tournament teams. Then you kind of get to the bottom, and Wake Forest is there as the 10 seed, but they've been playing really well, and they got John Collins who can carry them. And Virginia Tech struggles inside. Florida State, as you said, they peaked earlier in the year. Virginia, you never know if they're going to be able to score more than 40 points in a game. And, Notre Dame is a very strong team, but they definitely have holes in their armor too. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of who comes out of that bottom half of that bracket to advance to the final. And, it could be a surprising team. I think the top, I'm really looking forward to a potential Duke-Louisville matchup. And I'm looking forward to that first game that North Carolina is going to play, because both those teams are going to be, just off the bubble or, right on the bubble tournament teams that are, scratching and clawing for every point, every win possible. So that could be a very good game. And I think it's going to be a fantastic tournament. Whether there's going to be kind of a surprise team, I don't know. Nothing would surprise me more in the ACC. When we were doing our early season standings, North Carolina is still at the top, but I don't think we expected, Duke at the 5 and, Virginia all the way down at 6. It's very interesting to see how this plays out. And I'm very intrigued by this tournament. This is definitely going to be a very fun and interesting tournament to watch. All right, before we move on to the Big Ten tournament, I wanted to mention this is our last Sunday recap podcast of the year, believe it or not. So it's been a crazy year. It's kind of flown by. But next week, we're doing a special edition bracket tournament podcast / live show. Zach Beeler and Ryan Dullcamp will be with me as we will be on spring break. So we will all be together, but we will have a number of special guests. We have not confirmed our full list of guests that will be with us, but a lot of your podcast favorites will be on. And so it's going to be a great show. We're going to, probably take an hour and a half, 2 hours and break down the bracket and the teams that made it, the teams that didn't make it, and kind of give some of our picks going forward to help you out filling your brackets out. So definitely be sure to watch out for that next Sunday. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Big Ten tournament. And this is kind of interesting. The Big Ten's way down this year, but some of these teams, Illinois and Iowa, but the outright change. It's going to be a very interesting tournament. Wisconsin struggling, but they were able to beat Minnesota earlier today. So, Connor, we'll go to you. What are your thoughts on this Big Ten tournament lineup here?
I can tell you one thing. I probably won't watch a single game. The Big Ten this year has been atrocious. I don't feel like I can trust any team in the Big Ten. Even Purdue. I mean, they're obviously the clear favorites to win the tournament, and I'd probably pick them to win the Big Ten tournament just because of Caleb Swanigan. But I don't see any of these teams, having Sweet 16 level material. Obviously, I think teams like Wisconsin can get hot. They have Bronson Koenig. They have Ethan Happ. Those guys are good, but they've been a little inconsistent this season. 3-point shooting has been really inconsistent, which is something that they need to have going in order to find success. The only team that I could see making a small run is Purdue. Obviously, Caleb Swanigan, Vincent Edwards is playing really well recently, and of course they have Spike Albrecht, who has national championship experience. So you never know. He could spark another run, and Purdue could surprise some people. But other than that, I don't really see any of these teams as a real threat in March, and the conference tournament will probably be a slugfest.
Yeah, so the Big Ten tournament is, like Connor said, it's going to kind of be like a slugfest. There's no really clear-cut number one because you look at Purdue, and Purdue can sometimes be lackadaisical. I mean, Caleb Swanigan's a beast. He's Big Ten Player of the Year most likely. I think they're releasing that tomorrow. But the Big Ten just has not been strong this year, and Purdue's most likely going to run into either Illinois or Michigan in their first matchup, and that's not a cupcake game for them. They're going to have to earn it, and both of those teams are on the bubble playing Purdue. And then if Purdue wins that, they either got Michigan State or Wisconsin if things play out correctly. So it's going to be a test for Purdue. They easily have the toughest draw out of the top 4 seeds. But then you go to the bottom, and a team that I'm really high on, and I've liked them in the Big Ten for a while, and that's Minnesota. You look at Minnesota's road and who they're going to have to play. They're going to wind up playing most likely Northwestern. Could get Ohio State if Ohio State beats Rutgers and then upsets Northwestern. But let's assume that they're going to get Northwestern with them being the higher seed. And Northwestern has not looked good down the stretch this season. I mean, I believe they've lost 3 of their last 6 or something among those lines. And they're just being exposed. They barely beat Michigan on that Hail Mary play, which is unbelievable if you got a chance to see that. But Minnesota could find themselves as the Big Ten tournament champs. They're going to most likely be in the semifinals. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't, because they're going to play Maryland in the quarters or in the semis. And I'm not high on Maryland at all this year. They've had some decent wins, but no really standout win for Maryland. So then that puts Minnesota versus either Purdue or Wisconsin. And I think Minnesota does have a very good shot against either of those teams just because of the Big Ten and how crazy it's been this year.
Brett, do you have the Minnesota as the 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament? Because I'm looking at a bracket and it shows Minnesota potentially facing Michigan State or the winner of the Penn State-Nebraska game.
I have them as a 3 on the bracket I'm looking at. Things may have just changed, though, because Michigan and Nebraska just ended. Yeah, that Michigan game, I think Michigan won that game, so it kind of threw a wrench into things, as well as the Northwestern game earlier. So, Minnesota's in the top of the bracket now, and they're either going to face Michigan State or Nebraska, the winner of the Nebraska-Penn State game in that first game, and then they could play Purdue in the second game if Purdue advances. So that may change a little bit of your analysis, but it's still a tough route for Purdue because no matter what, I mean, the one team that if I was Purdue, I'd want to play in that top half is Maryland, honestly, out of the top 4 seeds. But, I mean, Purdue, Minnesota is what I just said could be the final. So if we get that in a semifinal, it's just a treat for us as viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. The bottom half of that bracket, Minnesota and Purdue are kind of the 2 threats to win it all. And they're in the top half of the bracket, and the bottom half is kind of going to be crazy. Ohio State's got talent. Rutgers has been playing well. Northwestern has been playing really well. They dropped a game to Purdue today, but it was a really tight one. Maryland just won on a crazy Melo Trimble shot. Wisconsin beat Minnesota today, and you never know what you're going to get from Indiana or Iowa. And Iowa's a team that is kind of playing their way out of the bubble. So the bottom half of that bracket's going to be crazy. I know everyone in Bloomington has no doubt that Indiana is going to just pull away and just win all these games and get the automatic bid into the tournament because, that's how the Hoosiers do it in the Big Ten tournament. Well, that's at least what we think. But Indiana has not won more than one game in the Big Ten tournament since Tom Crane has been hired. So I'm not extremely confident in that selection. But we will see. There's always a chance. That's why you have the tournament. There's always a chance. You never know. So that's very interesting, and I'm looking forward to the Big Ten tournament. I think it's going to be good. There's going to be some good teams, but the Big Ten's down this year, so I don't know if any of these teams have Sweet 16 potential, as Connor said. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Big 12 tournament, and it's going to be another one that has Kansas at the top and leading the way as usual. So we'll go to Brett. What are your thoughts on the Big 12 tournament?
Yeah, when you look at the Big 12 tournament, there's really 3 teams that catch your eye, and then the field's open from there. But that's kind of how the Big 12's been all season. You have Kansas, Baylor, and West Virginia on top, and everybody else is just chasing them and upsetting each other. So we'll most likely see all 3 of those teams in the semifinals. And then the other spot's kind of like a wild card. You got Iowa State versus Oklahoma State. And those are 2 of possibly the hottest teams in the country right now. 2 teams that were on the bubble at one point and then just pulled away and now would be considered for 6 or 7 seeds in March Madness. So these teams are more than capable of pulling off an upset on Kansas. So whether it's Oklahoma State or Iowa State playing Kansas in the semifinal, I think that's going to be an excellent game to watch. If it's Iowa State, maybe more of a defensive game. If it's Oklahoma State, it's going to be just a fist fight out there and just a transition kind of game. But that's what makes Kansas so dangerous this year. They do rely heavily on the 3. They don't really have a lot of inside presence, but they can adapt to any team's play style. And that's really helped them overcome a lot of close games this year. Kansas, if they're struggling in transition, they immediately change that and get the guys in there that can play in transition. And that's one thing that could lead Kansas to another Big 12 tournament title. But they're going to play a lot of different teams. Either TCU or Oklahoma, they're going to have to change their game plan for that. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, they're going to have to change their game plan for that. And if they wind up getting pressed Virginia in the finale, who knows? If they just played a team that plays them fast, they may be gassed going into that game, and West Virginia may be able to pull off a win for the Big 12 title. So it's going to be really interesting because I don't think that Kansas is as big of a favorite as people think they are, but there's no reason why they shouldn't win this tournament.
Absolutely. Connor, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Brett. I don't think Kansas is, I don't think they should be a shoo-in necessarily for the conference title. I'm really, really high on Iowa State. I don't know why. I think probably higher than I should be. But I love Monty Morris. I love Deontay Burton. I think he's a matchup nightmare. When Matt Thomas in whatever his name is, Naz Mitri Long or something, when they're hitting the 3, Iowa State's a very, very dangerous team. And Devontae Graham and Frank Mason don't like to play a ton of defense. So if Iowa State can get past Oklahoma State, which I think they will, that'll be a tough matchup for Kansas. And then if Kansas wins that game, I would expect them to see West Virginia in the final. I think Kansas State's going to give Baylor a tough game, but I'm not that sold on Baylor. I think they peaked really. I think they're a lot like Florida State. They kind of peaked really early, and people were really excited about them, and then they kind of fell off a little bit. West Virginia, I am terrified of that defense, especially if I'm Baylor, because the key to Baylor's success is their guard play. I mean, obviously Jonathan Motley's their best and most important player, but if you can kind of shut down their guard play, that kind of that stalls the offense a little bit. It doesn't help Motley get the ball in a good position as much. So I kind of like West Virginia to win that game, and then I don't think you can blow a 14-point lead a second time. So I like West Virginia to win the Big 12 tournament. Call me crazy, but I don't think it's going to be Kansas this year.
Wow, West Virginia to win the Big 12 tournament. I mean, that's probably it'll be 2 or 3 heart attacks for Bob Huggins before we even get to the championship at this rate. He's always a flight risk with Bob Huggins in a tight game. So that'll be interesting. The Big 12 tournament is going to be very. I don't really know. There's running out of adjectives, but Kansas is a good team. But I love Iowa State. Like Connor said, love Iowa State. but there's a lot of quality teams in here. I think Iowa State's going to be able to pull off that upset against Kansas. I'm fully with that. But then again, it is the conference tournament. So if Kansas loses the semifinal game to Iowa State, it might knock them down the seed line, but it might save them from playing 40 extra minutes and get Frank Mason and Devontae Graham a little bit on better rest for the NCAA tournament where it really matters. So I think it's going to be interesting. Definitely going to watch out some teams to kind of see who's playing well, because Baylor and West Virginia are tough teams to pick in the NCAA tournament. So I'm going to watch out those games to see how those teams are playing going into the tournament. All right, now we're going to go out west and talk about the Pac-12 with the three-headed monster, Oregon, Arizona, and UCLA. So what are your thoughts on that? We'll go to Connor first.
I actually think this might be the best conference tournament, only because of the three-headed monster of Oregon, Arizona, UCLA. I think all three of those teams could win I wouldn't be shocked if they were in the national championship. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw two of them in the Final Four. I kind of like UCLA to win the championship, just because I feel like they've been playing defense lately, which, a month ago, if you had said that, I would have called you crazy. But I feel like Lonzo Ball especially has been playing a lot better defense. And you saw the game against Oregon where they came back and won. He made it a lot tougher for Dylan Brooks, which in turn made it tougher for the entire Oregon team to kind of facilitate their offense. So I like UCLA to win. Obviously, they beat Arizona at Arizona, and that was huge. So I kind of like UCLA to win, matching it with Oregon in the final. You look at the teams that's on Oregon's side of the bracket: Utah, Cal. Cal just lost by like 30 or something to somebody bad. I don't remember.
Colorado.
But, yeah, Colorado. I think Oregon's going to have a cakewalk, and UCLA is going to be a little bit more tested, which I think is going to help them pull out the championship and get the auto bid, and maybe the 1 seed.
Wow, you're not picking Washington to go far? I mean, they got Lorenzo Romar and Markel Fultz coming through strong in the late season.
Fultz started dropping 40 a game and upset UCLA. I almost wouldn't be surprised, because it's Markel Fultz. I mean, he's the most talented player in the country. Maybe not the best at the college level, but I certainly think he's the most talented.
Well, we may not have seen this coming, but I do not believe that Markel Fultz will be playing in the Pac-12 tournament. There's some speculation on whether or not he's going to be skipping it, kind of like some college football players skipping their bowl games. There's no reason really for him to play in this game, and I do think that he's going to be sitting out. So I think we saw Markel Fultz last game in a Washington jersey.
No, don't let him fool you, Brett. He actually has a knee injury, and he's had a knee injury for like a few weeks now. I keep getting these notifications that his knee's injured, and I'm like, yeah, his knee is really injured. And the fact that the team's playing horrible and is going nowhere has nothing to do with his knee hurting him. It doesn't make any sense to me. All right, what are your thoughts on the tournament as a whole, Brett?
As a whole, I think Connor pretty much summed it up. It's just going to be these three teams battling it out for the Pac-12 tournament. I mean, Cal is just done. They look completely burned out, and their season's lost at this point. They were a bubble team, and they've just completely popped that bubble and then blown a few more and just shredded them up. So Cal, I do not see making the tournament at this point. Utah just has too many bad losses to make it at this point. If they do upset Oregon and then somehow win the Pac-12 tournament, then kudos to Utah. But I just don't see that happening. I see Oregon breezing through into final and then being tested by the winner of the UCLA-Arizona game. And that's just going to be an unbelievable game. It's a top 5, top 6 team matchup in the country. And these have been two of the most consistently good teams that we've seen all year. Arizona with their ability to play offense and defense, and Markkanen leading them against UCLA with Lonzo Ball and the whole hype there. So it's just going to be a crazy game to watch. I do believe UCLA will win that only because of their ability to score and how good they shoot from outside. I do believe that players like Aaron Holiday and TJ Leaf will step up for UCLA in that game and take some pressure off Lonzo Ball. And then that sets up with a matchup of Oregon versus UCLA, which everybody wants to see again because both times that these teams played, it was just unbelievably good basketball. And who can forget the Dylan Brooks buzzer beater? I mean, that was just crazy to beat UCLA, who was on a roll at the time, undefeated at the time too, I believe. So Oregon, UCLA, it's just really hard to choose for me. Both teams are 2 seeds in my latest bracketology. I do give UCLA maybe a 1-point favorite in this game, but honestly, the spread going into that game should be even because it's really anybody's game. It's just Lonzo Ball versus Dylan Brooks.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. For some reason, every time I watch Arizona the past couple weeks, they just look like they've struggled. So I think it's going to be UCLA and Oregon in the final, and I think it's going to be UCLA. I just think they're going to find a way to slow down Dylan Brooks enough, and that offense for UCLA is going to get going, and no one's going to be able to stop them. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but UCLA is going to win the Pac-12 tournament. It's going to be very interesting. So unfortunately, we are not going to be talking about the SEC tournament because the SEC is horrible at basketball other than like Florida, Kentucky, and like South Carolina. Everyone else is just absolutely horrible. So we're just going to skip over that. You know, you can go and spend your time watching the SEC tournament, but there's other tournaments that are better. But real quick,
it may not be UK.
You don't think it's going to
be UK? It may not be UK in that one. I would pick UK to win it, but there's a chance that a lower seed could potentially win that one just because of how crazy the SEC is.
I don't think any team from the SEC is going to make it to the Sweet 16. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And if any team does, it'll be South Carolina.
Wow. Hey, don't sleep on my Missouri Tigers.
You know, you can never sleep on Missouri. You know, Kim Anderson's done a great job there, and you know they're a real competitive bunch, real spirited bunch. So you never know. They could
recently fired Kim Anderson.
You know, they could rally around him like a Les Miles style kind of thing, and you know, come up with some amazing. But I want to do 2 quick hits, real quick, kind of throw you guys in the spot. So West Coast Conference, who are you guys picking? So we'll go to Connor first. Who are you picking for the West Coast? Is it going to be Gonzaga or St. Mary's or someone else?
I think it's going to be Gonzaga. The games they've played against, I think the only competition they have is St. Mary's. Obviously, they lost to BYU. I don't think BYU can beat them again, especially now because Mark Few can, you know, he would know a little bit better how to prepare for what they're going to throw at him. I just don't see St. Mary's is not a really good matchup for Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga spreads the ball out a little bit too much. They just don't make them that well down in Australia. So I like the Zags to win it. I still think they're one of the best teams in the country. Nigel Williams-Goss is my sleeper pick to finish in the top 5 of the Player of the Year voting. I don't think he can win it just because of the conference he plays in. But yeah, I love Gonzaga. So give me the Zags out on the West Coast.
It's funny, after they lost that game to BYU, people haven't really talked about Gonzaga. Like, they're still a great team. Like, they lost 1 game and it was to BYU. Like, BYU had some pretty good players. Like Eric Micah is an animal down low. Brad, who are you going with the West Coast Conference?
Yeah, I think Gonzaga will easily beat Santa Clara, no problem. There'll be another 25, 30-point victory for them in that one, setting up a matchup with either BYU or St. Mary's in the final. And that game tomorrow night between BYU and St. Mary's is going to be a pretty good one to watch if you're going to be up at 11 p.m. Eastern time and you have nothing better to do. Make sure you watch this BYU St. Mary's game because it's going to be – I think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game. We're looking in the 80s, maybe low 90s in this one, maybe even an overtime game. BYU is really hot right now. They're really under the radar. And I do think that they are going to upset St. Mary's in this one to set up a rematch against Gonzaga, who they have just beat about 2 weeks ago. And this one, I'm not really sure about. I think BYU does have a pretty good shot to win this tournament against Gonzaga. Obviously, if St. Mary's beats BYU tomorrow night, I'm going Gonzaga hands down because I just do not see St. Mary's being able to keep up with Gonzaga. But if there's one team in this conference that can, and they proved it earlier this season, is BYU. So if BYU somehow wins this conference tournament, I mean, that'd be crazy. BYU makes the tournament then as an auto bid. Nobody knows where Gonzaga falls now. Are they a 1 seed still? I mean, it'd be a bracketologist's worst nightmare because there goes another bubble team for the last 4 in. So I'm not really sure about this one. I mean, my mind wants me to pick Gonzaga, but my heart's telling me to pick BYU, so I'm not really sure about this one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is if BYU wins that, bubble teams everywhere will be absolutely so pissed off. It will be insane. All right, last quick hit I'm going to go with is the AAC with SMU and Cincy leading the way. So who you guys got in that one? We'll go right back to Brett.
Yeah, I think it should be SMU Cincy in the final, but we've always seen in the past that the American has a lot to throw at us. And it really hurts me to say this, but the team with the easiest, or what should be easiest schedule, is UConn. I don't like UConn, really. I don't like how they're a low seed every single year, and then they somehow make the tournament. It just makes me mad. But I do think UConn could find themselves in the semis playing Cincinnati. And if UConn gets hot, they could wind up winning this tournament, and that's crazy to think about the season that they've had. But we've seen it before, UConn get hot and being able to win it. I'm not picking them to win it. I do think that Cincinnati will win this one against SMU in the final. But if there was one team I had to pick as a sleeper, it would definitely be UConn.
All right, Connor, who are you picking in this one?
At the beginning of the season, I picked UConn as a sleeper for my Final Four, which was a terrible decision. I thought it was. I thought Kevin Ollie and his star guard Jalen Adams would fulfill the every third year pattern and make it back. Well, I was obviously very wrong, and I think they lose their first game in this tournament. I think they're terrible. I don't think they're. Jalen Adams is awesome, but I don't like the rest of their team at all. To win the tournament, I like SMU. I love SMU. I think they're really, really good. They play great defense. They play suffocating defense. I saw it against Cincinnati when they shut them down towards the end of the game. Their star, Semi Ojeleye, former Duke Blue Devil. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the country. And then obviously Shake Milton's a phenomenal point guard. I don't know why people are sleeping on SMU. Obviously they play in a weird conference that no one really pays attention to. So they're not getting as much media hype, but I think they're really, really good. I think they win the tournament, and I think they're a sleeper for my Final Four.
Wow, sleeper for the Final Four. The tough thing about that is they only have 7 scholarship players. They're really not a deep team, and that's why I'm going with Cincy in this one. I think playing 3 days in a row, that second half of that championship game, it's kind of get to the legs of the SMU players, and no offense to them, but that's really tough to play 3 days in a row with a 7-man rotation, if that. So I'm going with Cincy in this one, and I'm very high on Mick Cronin and his crew this year. Troy Copain's having a fantastic year. All right, so next we're going to go to a little buy or sell, and Brett wrote up the buy and sell this week, so if there's any complaints about it, just feel free to tweet it at him. So first we're going to go to Connor, and the buy or sell is UNC will win the ACC tournament.
I'm buying that, 100% buying that. I think they will not only win the ACC tournament, I think they will win the national championship. I think they are the best team in the country. They just look they just feel so complete at every position. Yesterday I accidentally took a nap for the first 3/4 of the Duke game, so I just went and watched it a couple hours ago, and they looked so good. Obviously Duke looked great, but North Carolina was answering every run that they had. And I love Roy Williams. Roy Williams has won 8 ACC titles in like 13 years, and he's only won 2 ACC Coach of the Year awards. I think he's weirdly like a really underrated coach, but I think he's great. I think this team is awesome. I love Justin Jackson. Obviously, I think we saw last night the key is going to be Joel Berry. If he can play well, they are pretty hard to beat. Isaiah Hicks has to stay out of foul trouble, but if he can, he is a beast inside. I think he had 20 points last night. Kennedy Meeks is just a tank, and Theo Pinson, the best glue guy in the country. So yeah, I'm buying North Carolina to win the ACC tournament.
Wow. I think you have a great point about Joel Berry. I tweeted that out last night. If he plays really well, they can win it all. And there's very little doubt in my mind that they can do that. And, Justin Jackson struggled shooting at the start of that game, but Joel Berry was good and the team kind of went along. So that's why he's kind of the key. If he doesn't play well, as good as Jackson has been, I watched them when they played Indiana, and Joel Berry was off his game, and the whole UNC team was off their game because of that. All right, Brett, buy or sell. A team with 14 losses will get in that large bid this year.
Well, we kind of discussed this earlier, and I'm going to buy this, unfortunately. I don't think a team with 14 losses deserves to be in, but you look at how weak the bubble is this year. All the teams on the bubble have 13 or 14 losses already, so I think it's almost a given that we're going to see a team with 14 to maybe even 15 losses make the tournament again. Some of those teams that we're looking at right now are Syracuse, who's 18-13, Michigan State, who's now 18-13, losing 2 straight to finish the season. And then a team that Joe Lunardi has on the bubble right now that a lot of people aren't really high on, thinking that they're on the bubble, is Vanderbilt, who's 17-14. And their only impressive wins really are against Florida twice. So I guess it's enough to keep them in the conversation for the field. Then you got some teams coming in behind them, like Iowa, who's red hot right now. They're 18-13, trying to make a tournament push. So I do think that we could see 1 to 2 teams with 14 losses make the tournament as one of the last few teams in, or a last team with a bye. I don't think it's crazy to think about, because you look at the season Syracuse has had. When you look at them earlier in the season, when they had that loss to UConn, they're a completely different team now. I mean, Jim Boeheim did an excellent job turning around Syracuse's season, and the same thing with Tom Izzo. I mean, Michigan State, earlier in the season, after losing Miles Bridges, struggled, almost losing to Florida Gulf Coast, St. John's, and then they wound up losing to Northeastern at home. And then he was able to turn things around late in Big Ten play and pick up some really solid victories. So I think these 2 teams are still on the bubble, but compared to all the other bubble teams, I think they're sitting pretty confident right now.
All right, I love it. My buy or sell is that Monmouth will not get in that large bid, much like last year. Buying that 100%. Monmouth is not getting in that large bid. It's not even close in my mind. As bad as the bubble is, Monmouth, I think if last year's Monmouth resume was on the bubble this year, I think they'd be in. But this year, they just don't have as many eye-popping wins. And, playing in the MAC with 2 A's, it's just not a very good conference. And that's just, I don't know. There's no really other way to put it. They're not playing quality teams, and they don't have the crazy wins that they had last year. So I think it's not going to be close for me either. All right, so we're going to kind of wrap it up and give a few picks. If you guys want, I'll throw it to you to kind of give a closing remark and give any mid-major or other tournament champion picks at this time. So we'll start it off with Brett and kind of go from there.
I mean, I don't really have many picks. I'm just going to be watching a lot of basketball this week before spring break and finishing up with school and everything. But A10, Dayton winning the championship, I'm not too sure about that one. That's one to watch. I think that VCU or maybe even Rhode Island could come out on top with the A10. And if Rhode Island comes on top in the A10, things are just going to be crazy with the predictions that we threw out earlier in the podcast. With some of these other tournaments destroying bubble teams, there may not even be a bubble by the end of Champ Week. Like, some random teams, these 5 and 6 seeds, may just somehow win the tournament and destroy a chance for a team like Kansas State or the Syracuse and Michigan States, like I just discussed, that are on the bubble right now, from getting in just because of these conference tournament champions. So for the A10, I'm going to pick Rhode Island in this one. I do think that they're going to upset Dayton and then upset VCU for the title. And then in another tournament that may surprise a lot of people, UNC Wilmington, the clear favorite tomorrow against Charleston in the final. I am very high on UNC Wilmington. I do think that they could potentially make it to the second weekend of the tournament. They're a very good basketball team. But Charleston is very tough, and they've shown it this year. Charleston, I'm not sure about that one either. I mean, Charleston's more than capable of beating UNC Wilmington. I am picking UNC Wilmington in this game, but I will not be surprised if Charleston wins that one. Wrap it up, my last prediction. I'm going to throw this one to the SoCon, which a lot of people don't really know what that stands for. It's Southern. If you don't, it doesn't really get much conversation, but the championship game tomorrow is UNC Greensboro versus East Tennessee State. UNC Greensboro, the 1 seed, they're the favorite to win. And some have been putting them at a 14, 15 seed in the tournament, maybe facing a team like Butler or West Virginia. But I don't think it's going to be UNCG in this game. I think it's going to be East Tennessee State pulling out the victory, winning the SoCon tournament, and probably going on to what we're looking at as a 14 seed in the tournament. They're a very dangerous team come tournament time, only because of their ability to shoot long range and play very fast. So if they draw West Virginia, and we've seen it before with a Southern team playing West Virginia, I think that East Tennessee State could give teams that press or are very defensively sound trouble, only because of their ability to speed up the game and play fast.
All right, I love it. Connor, what are your closing thoughts and hot takes or tournament picks you have for us?
Well, I got one championship pick for tomorrow. Brad, you mentioned earlier the MAC with 2 C's. We got Siena at 17-6 against Iona at 21-12. I'm gonna go with Siena with the upset. I think they're going to get the auto bid from the MAAC. And then I also like my my hometown Milwaukee Panthers in the Little Caesars Horizon League semifinal. And then probably my hottest take of the entire season, I think North Carolina A&T gets their second conference win tomorrow against Maryland Eastern Shore in the MEAC men's first round. It's gonna be a big day in North Carolina.
Wow. The hot takes are just flowing here from Connor. I love it. I'm going to go a little bit more traditional. I'm picking, I hope Zach Bueller's listening to this. I'm flipping sides. I'm picking Minnesota is going to win the Big Ten tournament. You heard it here first. I've been giving everyone crap for picking Minnesota to win the Big Ten tourney, but I'm finally on board. They're not going to flame out, as I previously said. Minnesota is going to win the Big Ten tourney, and I'm glad I can get it out now before the tournament starts. So I'm happy that's going to happen.
17, right?
They did lose today, but it was at the Kohl Center. We're good. We're fine. Richard Pitino can coach them up. I'll tell you. So they're gonna play really well. Other than that, it's good. They're probably gonna match up against IU in the championship. I forgot to mention that, but that's gonna be fantastic. All my hometown schools got knocked out, unfortunately, so I can't be extremely biased towards them like Connor is. But other than that. Our last Sunday recap podcast, our last top 25 polls coming out, so it's come to the close for our regular season, but that just means stuff's going to be hyping up for the tournament. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at EDU Pride Press, where we will be tweeting updates and opinions and all sorts of stuff. And also, if you go, we have a new menu on the College Pride Press website. If you click the NCAA tournament button that's at the top, you will get all of our March preview articles, which preview the strengths and weaknesses of the tournament teams, as well as our preview articles. Once we get the bracket, we're going to get a preview up for each and every tournament game, so you can fill out your bracket like that. So be sure to check that stuff out. We also have, NBA draft stuff that Brett just released a few days ago. That's a great thing to look at as you're kind of watching. If you're a big NBA fan, you're going to want to kind of circle a few games on your schedule to watch guys that your teams could pick up in the draft this year. So definitely be sure to check that out. And, closing up with the conference tournaments this week, it's going to be a fantastic week. It's going to be crazy. I'm going to be traveling midway through the week, but I'm going to be watching games on the road and everything like that. So I'm not going to be slacking off in the least bit next week or this week. So, it's all fun stuff. Thanks for Connor and, as always, Brett, for joining me. And hope you guys have a great week.